Word of the showdown at the park spread quickly through the small town. By the next morning, it seemed like everyone had heard about how Sarah and her dogs had handled the Iron Reapers. Locals who had once seen her as just another quiet newcomer now looked at her with a mix of admiration and respect. Parents brought their children to meet Sarah, eager for them to learn from her story. "These aren't just pets," she explained patiently to a group of wide-eyed kids gathered around her. "They're working dogs, trained to listen, protect, and work as a team." Max and Luna became minor celebrities overnight. Neighbors stopped by to say hello, offering treats or asking questions about their training. Some even joked that having Sarah and her dogs in town might finally keep troublemakers like the Iron Reapers in line. Sarah appreciated the support but remained humble, always giving credit to Max and Luna. "They're the real heroes here," she'd say with a smile, scratching behind her ears. Even the local sheriff paid her a visit one afternoon. He introduced himself as Deputy Harris, tipping his hat as he approached her farmhouse. "Ms. Reeves, I wanted to thank you personally," he said, shaking her hand. "You handled that situation better than most folks would have. No violence, no escalation, just quick thinking and skill." Sarah nodded, explaining that de-escalation was key in any confrontation. "My dogs are trained to respond, not provoke," she added. "And sometimes, showing restraint is the strongest move you can make." But the ripple effects of the incident didn't stop there. Rumors began circulating about Sarah's past. People whispered about her time in the military, speculating that she had worked with elite units overseas, while some details were exaggerated, like claims that Max and Luna had taken down entire enemy squads. The stories served a purpose. They kept the Iron Reapers at bay. Tank and his crew avoided Sarah entirely, steering clear of her neighborhood and skipping their usual haunts whenever they heard she might be nearby. For Sarah, life slowly returned to normal, or as normal as it could be after such an event. She continued her daily routines, taking Max and Luna on long runs and practicing drills in the yard. But something had shifted inside her. The encounter with the bikers reminded her of the strength she carried, not just physical strength, but mental and emotional resilience too. It wasn't just about being tough. It was about staying calm under pressure and trusting in her abilities. One evening, as the sun dipped below the horizon, Sarah sat on her porch with Max and Luna lying at her feet. She watched the field sway gently in the breeze, feeling the deep sense of gratitude. For years, she had wondered if civilian life would ever feel fulfilling after the intensity of her military career. But now, surrounded by her loyal companions and embraced by a community that respected her, she realized she had found her place. Her thoughts drifted back to Tank and his gang. She knew they weren't bad people at their core, just misguided and insecure. Sarah hoped the lesson her dogs had taught them would stick, not out of fear, but as a reminder of humility. Maybe, she thought, this could be the start of something bigger, a chance to show others what discipline, trust, and teamwork truly meant. As Max let out a contented sigh and rested his head on her boot, Sarah smiled softly. Whatever challenges lay ahead, she felt ready to face them, not because she was invincible, but because she wasn't alone. With Max and Luna by her side, she had everything she needed to navigate whatever came her way. And for the first time in a long while, she felt at peace. In a small, quiet town surrounded by rolling hills and dusty roads, there lived a woman named Sarah Reeves. She was unlike anyone else in the area, calm, confident, and fiercely independent. Sarah had spent years serving in the military as a K-9 handler, working alongside some of the most highly trained dogs in the world. After her service, she decided to settle down in this peaceful town, hoping for a simpler life. But Sarah wasn't alone. She brought two loyal companions with her. Max, a sleek Belgian Malinois with piercing eyes, and Luna, a strong yet graceful German shepherd. These weren't just pets, they were her partners, trained to protect, obey, and work seamlessly with her. Every morning, Sarah took Max and Luna on long runs through the countryside. It was their routine, a way to stay sharp and bond even after leaving the military. The townsfolk often saw them jogging along the trails, Max and Luna moving like shadows beside her. Most people admired the trio, but not everyone shared that respect. One sunny afternoon, while Sarah and her dogs were passing through a quieter part of town near an old gas station, they encountered a group of bikers. They called themselves the Iron Reapers, a rough bunch known for their loud motorcycles, leather jackets covered in patches, and a tendency to cause trouble wherever they went. The bikers were gathered around their bikes, smoking and laughing loudly when they noticed Sarah approaching. At first, they didn't pay much attention, but then one of them, a large, muscular man with tattoos covering his arms, spotted her. His name was Tank, and he was the self-proclaimed leader of the gang. He squinted at Sarah and smirked, nudging his friends. "Hey, check it out," he said, pointing at her. "Looks like we've got ourselves a soldier girl over here." Tank's voice carried across the distance, dripping with mockery. "What's the deal, sweetheart? You think those little mutts can keep you safe?" His comment made the other bikers burst into laughter, their voices echoing off the nearby buildings. Some of them exchanged jokes about how funny it was that a woman needed dogs to feel tough. Others chimed in, teasing her about being too weak to handle herself without backup. Sarah heard every word, but she didn't react. She'd faced far worse insults during her time in the military and knew better than to rise to the bait. Instead, she kept walking, her posture straight and steady. Max and Luna stayed close to her sides, their ears perked up, alert to the tension in the air. To anyone watching, it might have seemed like Sarah was ignoring the bikers completely. But inside, she felt a flicker of irritation, and something else, determination. She trusted her dogs completely, knowing they were more than capable of handling any situation if things escalated. As she passed by the group, Tank stepped forward, blocking her path slightly. "You hear me, lady?" he asked, raising his voice. "I said, what good are those dogs gonna do against real men?" This time, Sarah stopped. Without saying a word, she gave Max and Luna a subtle signal. In unison, both dogs turned their heads toward Tank, locking their intense gazes onto him. For a moment, the laughter died down, replaced by an uneasy silence. Even Tank hesitated, feeling the weight of those sharp, intelligent eyes staring him down. But Sarah didn't engage further. With a slight tug on the leashes, she continued walking, leaving the bikers behind. As she disappeared down the road, Tank muttered under his breath, "We'll see how tough she really is." Little did he know, Sarah wasn't someone to underestimate. And neither were her dogs. Weeks turned into months, and life in the small town settled into a new rhythm. The Iron Reapers were rarely seen around Sarah's neighborhood anymore, and when they did appear, they kept their distance. It was as if an invisible boundary had been drawn, one that no biker dared to cross. But while Sarah appreciated the peace, she didn't expect the unexpected twist that came next. One crisp autumn morning, as golden leaves swirled across her driveway, Sarah noticed a lone figure approaching her farmhouse. At first, she thought it might be one of her neighbors stopping by to chat, but as the person drew closer, she recognized him instantly. It was Jake, one of the younger members of the Iron Reapers. He looked nervous, his hands shoved deep into the pockets of his leather jacket. In one hand, he held a leash attached to a scruffy pit bull mix with patches of uneven fur. Sarah stepped onto her porch, Max and Luna standing protectively beside her. "Can I help you?" she asked, her tone neutral but firm. She didn't know what to expect, but she was prepared for anything. Jake hesitated, glancing down at his dog before meeting her gaze. I wanted to apologize," he stammered, his voice barely above a whisper, "for how we acted before. We were out of line." His words caught Sarah off guard. She hadn't expected an apology, especially not from someone like Jake. He shifted uncomfortably, then gestured toward the pit bull. "And I was wondering, could you maybe teach me how to train my dog? I heard you're good at it." Sarah studied him carefully. Jake wasn't much older than his early 20s, and there was a sincerity in his eyes that she hadn't noticed before. Maybe it was pride swallowing its pride, or maybe it was something deeper, a desire to change. Either way, she decided to give him a chance. "All right," she said finally, stepping aside to let him onto the property. "But training isn't just about commands. It's about trust, patience, and understanding. Are you ready for that?" Jake nodded eagerly, and over the next few weeks, Sarah began working with him and his dog. She taught him basic obedience techniques, showing him how to build a bond with his pet through positive reinforcement. Slowly but surely, the scruffy pit bull started to transform, not just in behavior, but in spirit. The once timid dog began wagging its tail more often, responding eagerly to Jake's commands. Word of Jake's progress spread among the Iron Reapers. To everyone's surprise, a few other bikers showed up at Sarah's farm, asking for her help with their own dogs. Some were hesitant at first, clearly uncomfortable seeking advice from someone they had once mocked. But Sarah welcomed them without judgment, focusing on the shared love of animals that brought them together. The training sessions became a regular occurrence, turning Sarah's quiet farm into an unlikely gathering spot. What started as lessons for individual dogs soon evolved into group activities, where bikers learned alongside townsfolk who also brought their pets. Watching burly men crouch down to offer treats to eager puppies was a sight no one could have predicted. But it worked. Slowly, barriers began to break down. Even Tank made an appearance one day, though he stayed on the sidelines, watching silently. When Sarah approached him, he muttered a gruff thanks before leaving quickly. It wasn't much, but it was enough to show that even the toughest exteriors could crack under the right circumstances. Through it all, Max and Luna remained constant fixtures, observing every interaction with calm authority. They seemed to understand their role in this newfound harmony, acting as ambassadors between worlds that once clashed. For Sarah, seeing these two sides come together was proof of something she'd always believed. Kindness and respect could bridge any gap. As the days grew shorter and winter approached, Sarah reflected on how far things had come. What had started as tension and hostility had blossomed into connection and growth. And while she knew challenges would always exist, she felt hopeful for herself, for her community, and for the future. Tank's decision to swing the chain was a reckless one, a move born out of frustration and misplaced bravado. He clearly thought he could intimidate Sarah and her dogs with sheer size and aggression. But what he didn't realize was that he was stepping into territory far beyond his understanding. As he swung the chain toward Max, the dog reacted instantly, moving with a speed and precision that left everyone watching in awe. "Engage," Sarah commanded firmly, her voice cutting through the tension like a knife. It was all Max and Luna needed to hear. Years of military training kicked in as they sprang into action, each movement calculated and deliberate. Max darted forward, targeting Tank's legs with pinpoint accuracy. Before Tank could even process what was happening, Max had pinned him down, gripping the fabric of his jeans just hard enough to send a clear message. Any further aggression would come at a cost. Luna, meanwhile, positioned herself strategically between Sarah and the rest of the bikers. Her deep, commanding bark echoed across the park, freezing the other men in their tracks. The bikers exchanged uneasy glances, unsure of whether to intervene or retreat. None of them had expected this outcome. To them, Max and Luna were just ordinary dogs, pets even. But now, faced with their discipline and power, the bikers realized they were dealing with something entirely different. Tank cursed under his breath, clutching his leg where Max had pinned him. "Call your damn dog off," he shouted, his voice laced with panic. For the first time since Sarah had met him, he looked genuinely afraid. His bravado had vanished, replaced by wide-eyed disbelief. The same man who had mocked her only moments ago was now sprawled on the ground, completely at the mercy of a dog trained to handle far more dangerous situations. Sarah walked over calmly, her demeanor unshaken. She gave another sharp command, and Max immediately released Tank, stepping back to stand beside Luna. Both dogs remained alert, their eyes never leaving the bikers. Sarah crouched down slightly, meeting Tank's gaze. "This is your one warning," she said, her tone firm but controlled. "Mess with me again, and my dogs won't be so forgiving." The crowd that had gathered erupted into murmurs of approval. Parents holding their children's hands clapped softly, while others nodded in admiration. Even some of the bikers looked impressed, though they tried to hide it behind scowls. Tank scrambled to his feet, brushing dirt off his clothes. His face burned with humiliation as he muttered something under his breath and signaled for his crew to leave. One by one, the bikers mounted their motorcycles, revving their engines loudly in an attempt to save face. But the damage was done. They'd been outmatched, and everyone knew it. As the roar of their bikes faded into the distance, Sarah turned her attention back to Max and Luna. Both dogs stood proudly beside her, their tails wagging slightly as if to say, "We've got this." Sarah knelt down, scratching them behind the ears. "Good job, team," she whispered, her voice filled with pride. They weren't just her dogs, they were her partners, and today they had proven once again why their bond was unbreakable. The park slowly returned to normal as people resumed their activities, though whispers about the incident lingered. A young boy approached Sarah cautiously, tugging on his mother's hand. "Are those police dogs?" he asked, his eyes wide with curiosity. Sarah smiled warmly, shaking her head. "No, they're not police dogs," she replied, "but they're trained to protect and work together. And they're very good at what they do." The encounter had lasted only a few minutes, but its impact was undeniable. Not only had Sarah and her dogs defended themselves, but they had also sent a powerful message. Strength wasn't about size or intimidation. It was about skill, teamwork, and knowing when to stand your ground. As Sarah packed up her training gear and prepared to leave the park, she felt a renewed sense of confidence. Whatever challenges lay ahead, she knew she wouldn't have to face them alone. With Max and Luna by her side, she was ready for anything. In the days following her encounter with the Iron Reapers, Sarah couldn't shake the feeling that something wasn't right. At first, it was small things, like hearing the distant rumble of motorcycle engines late at night, or catching a glimpse of headlights flashing near her property. She lived on a quiet farm at the edge of town, surrounded by open fields and tall trees, so any unusual activity stood out to her. Max and Luna seemed to sense it too. They were always alert, their ears twitching and bodies tense whenever they heard strange noises outside. One evening, as the sun dipped below the horizon and painted the sky in shades of orange and purple, Sarah decided to take Max and Luna for a walk around her farmhouse. It was one of her favorite times of day, peaceful and quiet, with just the sound of crickets chirping and leaves rustling in the breeze. But tonight, the calm was broken by the faint hum of an engine in the distance. Sarah paused, listening closely. The noise grew louder before abruptly cutting off, leaving an eerie silence behind. Max let out a low growl, his hackles rising as he scanned the area. Luna mirrored his stance, her sharp eyes darting toward the tree line. Sarah instinctively tightened her grip on their leashes. "Easy," she murmured softly, trying to keep her voice steady. She trusted her dog's instincts. They had been trained to detect danger long before humans could see or hear it. Still, she couldn't ignore the uneasiness creeping into her chest. The next morning, Sarah noticed fresh tire tracks near her driveway. They weren't from a car, but from motorcycles, unmistakably wide and deep. Someone had been there during the night, probably watching her house. A chill ran down her spine, but she refused to let fear take over. Instead, she took action. That afternoon, she reinforced the locks on her gates and installed motion-activated lights around her property. She also made sure her dogs stayed close to her at all times, knowing they were her best line of defense. Despite these precautions, the tension lingered like a storm cloud waiting to burst. Sarah tried to focus on her daily routine, spending time training Max and Luna in the yard. Their drills were more than just practice. They were a way for her to clear her mind and stay prepared for whatever might come. Whether it was teaching them new commands or running through obstacle courses, the bond between Sarah and her dogs only grew stronger. Watching them move with precision and focus gave her a sense of control in an otherwise uncertain situation. But no matter how busy she kept herself, Sarah couldn't ignore the growing feeling that the Iron Reapers hadn't forgotten about her. Tank's mocking words echoed in her mind. "We'll see how tough she really is." She knew better than to underestimate people like him. In her years as a military K-9 handler, she'd learned that bullies often acted out of insecurity, and when backed into a corner, they could become dangerous. Still, Sarah wasn't afraid. She reminded herself of everything she and her dogs had been through together. From high-stakes missions overseas to grueling training exercises, they had faced challenges far greater than a group of rowdy bikers. And while she hoped it wouldn't come to a confrontation, she was ready if it did. Max and Luna were more than just pets. They were highly skilled partners who could read her every move and anticipate her needs. Together, they formed a team that was nearly unstoppable. As the days passed, Sarah found herself reflecting on why the Iron Reaper's behavior bothered her so much. It wasn't just the insults or the invasion of her privacy. It was the disrespect. These men didn't know her story, yet they judged her based on appearances. They saw a woman walking two dogs and assumed she was weak. What they failed to understand was that strength wasn't about size or aggression. It was about confidence, preparation, and knowing when to stand your ground. Sarah smiled to herself as she watched Max and Luna playfully chase each other across the yard. They may have looked like ordinary dogs to some, but she knew better. To her, they were heroes, loyal, brave, and incredibly smart. If the Iron Reapers thought they could intimidate her, they were in for a surprise. Whatever happened next, Sarah was ready. As the weeks rolled on, Sarah found herself reflecting deeply on everything that had happened. Her life had taken a turn she never could have predicted when she first moved to the quiet town. What began as an ordinary attempt to settle into civilian life had transformed into something extraordinary, a journey of self-discovery, resilience, and unexpected connections. One evening, after finishing a training session with Jake and a few other bikers, Sarah sat on her porch, watching Max and Luna playfully chase each other in the fading light. The laughter of dogs filled the air, mingling with the distant hum of crickets. She felt a sense of calm she hadn't experienced in years. For so long, she had carried the weight of her military past, memories of intense missions, the bonds forged under pressure, and the sacrifices made along the way. But now, surrounded by this new chapter of her life, she realized she was no longer defined solely by those experiences. Max trotted over, dropping a chewed-up tennis ball at her feet. Sarah picked it up, smiling as she tossed it across the yard. "You're still asking for more, huh?" she teased, scratching him behind the ears when he returned. Luna joined them, nudging Sarah's arm affectionately. These two dogs weren't just her companions. They were reminders of everything she had overcome and everything she was capable of achieving. Her thoughts drifted back to the Iron Reapers. At first, they had been nothing but troublemakers, loud and intimidating, determined to push boundaries. But through patience and understanding, Sarah had managed to break through their tough exteriors. She thought about Jake, who had gone from being part of the problem to becoming one of her most dedicated students. His transformation wasn't just about learning how to train his dog. It was about finding a sense of purpose and responsibility. And Tank, while he still kept his distance, his occasional nods or muttered thanks spoke volumes. It was proof that even the hardest hearts could soften given the right approach. Sarah also thought about the townspeople who had rallied around her after the incident at the park. Their support had reminded her of the importance of community. In the military, teamwork meant survival. Here, it meant belonging. Whether it was parents bringing their kids to watch her training sessions or neighbors offering help with repairs around her farm, she felt embraced in ways she hadn't anticipated. This small town, once unfamiliar, had become home. But perhaps the biggest change was within herself. Sarah had always prided herself on her strength and independence, qualities honed during her years as a K-9 handler. Yet, she had come to realize that true strength wasn't about standing alone. It was about knowing when to lean on others and when to extend a hand. Her bond with Max and Luna exemplified that perfectly. They relied on her just as she relied on them. Together, they formed a partnership built on trust, communication, and mutual respect. That night, as Sarah lay in bed listening to the gentle sounds of the countryside, she allowed herself to dream about the future. She envisioned expanding her work beyond individual lessons, maybe even starting a program to teach responsible pet ownership and basic obedience skills to anyone interested. She imagined creating a safe space where people from all walks of life could connect, not through judgment or fear, but through shared goals and compassion. By morning, her mind was made up. After breakfast, she called Jake and invited him to join her for a brainstorming session. Together, they sketched out ideas for workshops and community events. Word spread quickly, and soon others volunteered to help. Bikers, neighbors, and even local business owners eager to contribute. Sarah's vision was becoming a reality, one step at a time. As she stood in her yard later that day, watching everyone pitch in to set up equipment for the first workshop, she felt a profound sense of fulfillment. Life had thrown challenges her way, but she had faced them head-on, with courage, determination, and the unwavering support of her loyal companions. Whatever came next, Sarah knew she was ready. With Max and Luna by her side, there was no limit to what she could accomplish. Copy. Ask. Explain. A few days later, Sarah decided it was time to take Max and Luna somewhere new. She wanted to give them a chance to stretch their legs and practice some advanced drills in a different environment. The local park had wide open spaces, winding trails, and plenty of distractions, perfect for testing their focus. It was early afternoon when she arrived, the sun shining brightly overhead as families picnicked on the grass and children laughed while playing frisbee. Everything seemed peaceful at first glance. Sarah set up a small training area near an empty field, using cones and markers from her car to create obstacles. Max and Luna were eager to get started, their tails wagging with excitement as they waited for her commands. As usual, they moved with precision, responding instantly to every signal she gave. Whether it was sprinting through cones, leaping over hurdles, or executing complicated turns, the dogs performed flawlessly. People passing by stopped to watch, impressed by the level of teamwork between Sarah and her companions. Some even clapped quietly, admiring the skill and discipline on display. But then, the unmistakable roar of motorcycle engines shattered the calm. Heads turned as the Iron Reapers rolled into the parking lot, their bikes rumbling loudly enough to draw everyone's attention. Tank led the pack, his massive frame towering over the others as he dismounted. He wore the same smug grin he'd had during their last encounter, his eyes scanning the area until they landed on Sarah. Without hesitation, he swaggered toward her, his boots crunching against the gravel path. "Well, well," Tank said, his voice dripping with sarcasm. "Look who decided to put on another little show." His buddies circled around him, revving their engines and laughing obnoxiously. A few park visitors glanced nervously in their direction, unsure of what might happen next. Sarah ignored the commotion, keeping her focus on Max and Luna, but she could feel the tension rising, like static electricity crackling in the air. Tank stepped closer, leaning in so his shadow loomed over her. "Still playing soldier girl," he taunted, folding his arms across his chest. "Bet your little lapdogs ain't worth much without their fancy army gear." His words carried weight, but Sarah didn't flinch. She knew better than to let him get under her skin. Instead, she gave a subtle hand signal to Max and Luna, who immediately flanked her protectively. Their sharp eyes locked onto Tank, daring him to make a move. For a moment, no one spoke. The only sounds were the distant chatter of parkours and the faint rustle of leaves in the breeze. Then, Tank's smirk widened. "What's the matter, sweetheart? Cat got your tongue." He reached out suddenly, attempting to pat Max on the head. Maybe I'll teach him a thing or two about real toughness." Before his hand could touch the dog, Max snapped warningly, his teeth flashing inches from Tank's fingers. Startled, Tank stumbled backward, cursing loudly. His friends erupted into laughter, egging him on. "Aw, man, did the puppy scare ya?" one of them teased, slapping his knee. Embarrassed and angry, Tank straightened up, his face reddening with rage. "You think this is funny?" he growled, glaring at Sarah. "You want to play games with me? Fine. Let's see what those mutts are really made of." He reached for a heavy chain hanging from his belt, swinging it menacingly in front of him. The metallic links clinked together as he took a step forward, clearly intending to provoke a reaction. Sarah remained calm, her expression unreadable. She knew exactly what to do if things escalated, but she hoped it wouldn't come to that. This wasn't just about pride. It was about de-escalation and avoiding unnecessary conflict. Still, she couldn't deny the adrenaline coursing through her veins. If Tank pushed too far, he would quickly learn that mocking a military K-9 handler and her dogs was a mistake he'd regret. The crowd that had gathered began whispering among themselves, sensing the tension building. Some people backed away, not wanting to get caught in the middle, while others stayed to see how the situation would unfold. All eyes were on Sarah, Max, and Luna. Whatever happened next, it was clear that the stakes had been raised, and Tank was about to discover just how capable Sarah's little lapdogs truly were. Months passed, and Sarah's vision for the community began to take shape in ways she could never have imagined. What started as informal training sessions on her farm grew into something much larger, a full-fledged program called Paws and Peace. The name was simple but meaningful, reflecting both the bond between humans and animals and the harmony it brought to people who might otherwise never connect. Every weekend, her yard buzzed with activity, children laughing as they learned basic commands with their pets, bikers working alongside families, and even Deputy Harris showing up occasionally to lend a hand. The transformation within the Iron Reapers was perhaps the most remarkable part of it all. Jake had become one of Sarah's most reliable helpers, often arriving early to set up cones or assist newcomers. His once unkempt pit bull mix, now named Rusty, had blossomed into a confident, well-behaved dog who loved performing tricks for treats. Other members of the gang followed suit, bringing their own dogs to join in the fun. Tank still kept his distance, but he no longer sneered at Sarah when their paths crossed. Instead, he nodded respectfully, acknowledging the change she had sparked, not just in him, but in the entire group. One sunny Saturday morning, Sarah hosted a special event, a community showcase where participants could demonstrate what they had learned. Families gathered on picnic blankets, cheering as dogs performed obedience routines, agility drills, and even playful games like Fetch the Frisbee. Max and Luna stole the show, of course, showcasing their military-grade precision while staying approachable and friendly. When Sarah gave a short speech about teamwork, trust, and the power of second chances, the crowd erupted into applause. Afterward, as people mingled over snacks and lemonade, Jake approached Sarah with a shy smile. "I wanted to thank you again," he said, scratching Rusty behind the ears. "Not just for helping me train my dog, but for everything else too. You've changed us, you know. Made us better." Sarah shook her head modestly. "You did the hard work yourself," she replied. "All I did was give you tools and encouragement. The rest is up to you." But Jake wasn't the only one expressing gratitude. Parents told her how their kids looked forward to Saturdays because of the lessons, and because of Max and Luna, who had become unofficial mascots of the program. Neighbors praised her for bridging gaps in the community, turning strangers into friends. Even Deputy Harris joked that crime rates in the area seemed lower since everyone was too busy playing with their dogs to cause trouble. As the day wound down, Sarah found herself standing alone under a tree, watching the sunset paint the sky in hues of orange and pink. Max and Luna lay at her feet, exhausted from a long day of demonstrations and playtime. She felt an overwhelming sense of peace, something she hadn't fully experienced since leaving the military. For so long, she had wondered if civilian life would ever feel fulfilling. Now, surrounded by this unlikely family she had built, she knew she had found her true calling. Her thoughts drifted back to the first time she encountered the Iron Reapers, the mocking words, the tension, the fear she refused to show. Back then, she couldn't have guessed how things would turn out. But looking around now, at the laughter and camaraderie filling her yard, she realized something important. Strength wasn't about intimidation. It was about understanding. It wasn't about winning battles. It was about building bridges. Max nudged her leg gently, pulling her out of her thoughts. She smiled, kneeling down to scratch his head. "What do you think, boy?" she asked softly. "Think we're making a difference." Luna barked happily, wagging her tail in agreement. Sarah chuckled, standing up to stretch. Whatever challenges lay ahead, she knew she wouldn't face them alone. With Max and Luna by her side, and a community that had embraced her wholeheartedly, she felt ready for anything. As darkness fell and the last of the visitors drove away, Sarah closed the gate behind them, smiling to herself. Life had taken her on an unexpected journey, but every twist and turn had led her exactly where she was meant to be. Together, she and her dogs had proven that kindness, patience, and teamwork could overcome even the toughest obstacles. And as she walked back to the house, flanked by her loyal companions, she knew this was only the beginning of a brighter future. For her town, and for everyone whose lives had been touched by pause and peace.